Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Hugh McKay, President of the Board of Directors of the City Club. Labor experts predict that soon 2/3 of all jobs will require some form of post-secondary education. It's clear that millions more Americans will need to enroll and succeed in college. Today's speaker, Jamie Merisotis, President and CEO of the Lumina Foundation, is focused on this economic imperative and Lumina's commitment to a, quote, big goal for college completion. The Lumina Foundation is the nation's largest private foundation committed to enrolling and graduating more students from college, especially low-income students, students of color, first-generation students, and adult learners. Lumina's goal is to increase the percentage of Americans who hold high-quality degrees and credentials to 60% by 2025. Mr. Merisotis is a member of numerous boards of trustees and commissions, and he previously served as chairman of the board for Scholarship America, the nation's largest private sector scholarship and education support organization, as vice chairman of the board of directors of the Washington Internship Institute and the National College Access Network. Mr. Merisotis was founder of the Institute for Higher Education Policy, a nonpartisan think tank. Mr. Merisotis has also served as executive director of the National Commission on Responsibilities for Financing Post-Secondary Education. He authored the Commission's final report, Making College Affordable Again, and many of the Commission's recommendations have shaped national policy. Mr. Merisotis has also helped create AmeriCorps. He has written and edited several books and monographs, and he's a frequent contributor to magazines, journals, and newspapers. His writing has appeared in the Washington Post, the Times of London Higher Education Supplement, the Chronicle of Higher Education in Europe, the Review of Higher Education, and many other national and international publications. Mr. Merisotis is widely respected for his message of opening and expanding what he has called the, quote, portals of opportunity. Please welcome to the City Club, Jamie Merisotis.
Well, thank you very much, Hugh. I'm delighted to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here at the City Club. And, you know, I want to begin by congratulating the City Club on its 100th anniversary and also say what a privilege it is to have an opportunity to be here given the lineup of remarkable individuals who've addressed this club over the years. It's humbling to consider the combined wisdom of a group that includes everyone from Williams Jennings Bryant and Marion Wright Edelman to people like Ronald Reagan and Cesar Chavez. Clearly, this venue has been a beacon of learning for many decades, and that's really another really important reason why it's a delight to be here and joining with all of you. After all, I'm here to talk about learning, specifically college-level learning and the importance to the economy and America's future that college-level learning represents. A college education, and I want to be clear that when I say college, I mean anything that is post-high school in nature, has always been valuable, of course. It's added immeasurably to my own life, so much so that I've made it my life's work to advocate for the enormous benefits of post-secondary education, to make college more accessible for all Americans, and to help ensure that many more students stay in school and earn their degrees. You know, the thing is, after more than 2 decades of doing this work, I'm more convinced than ever in the power of higher education. In fact, it's clear today that college attainment is no longer merely beneficial, it's vital to individual success and to the future of our nation as a whole. Now, over the last few weeks, we've seen unprecedented attention to the issues of college affordability and rising student debt nationally. As a result, we've also heard a lot about the value of a college education, especially in these economically turbulent times, as well as the quality of the credentials that we're awarding at our colleges and universities. Today, in my brief remarks with all of you, I hope to underscore why a post-secondary degree or credential is really more important now than it's ever been before. And I also want to talk about how you can play a part in the critical national imperative of achieving much higher levels of high-quality educational attainment for the vast majority of Americans. Now, to give you some sense of where I'm coming from, it might be helpful to tell you a little bit more about me and also about the organization that I represent. I grew up in a family of limited means, and I'm proud to call myself a first-generation college graduate. I was fortunate to have parents who pushed me and my siblings to achieve more educationally, even though they themselves never had those opportunities. I also benefited greatly from the support of the federal government, from my local community, my church, my alma mater, and from many others. In fact, I've called myself a walking advertisement for virtually every form of financial aid that was available when I attended college, from Pell Grants to student loans to a whole lot of work. Now, my experience isn't atypical. There are many Americans just like me. But more importantly, there are many millions more who need the opportunities that I was fortunate enough to have. And that's where an organization like the Lumina Foundation really comes in. Based in in Indianapolis, Lumina Foundation is a national foundation that plays a fairly unusual role as one of the nation's largest private foundations. We're committed to this single cause, enrolling and graduating more students from college, especially, as Hugh pointed out, low-income students, first-generation students, students of color, and adult learners. In fact, we are the largest private endowment in the country that focuses exclusively on that kind of a mission. Now, we pursue our mission in a very targeted way. All of our resources and all of our energies are focused not on individual achievement through things like scholarships or other support, but on system-level change that can lead to large-scale impact. Lumina's entire focus is on achieving that big goal that Hugh talked about, what we call Goal 2025, which is that 60% of Americans should hold high-quality college degrees and credentials by the year 2025. Now, today, the national degree attainment rate is a shade above 38%. Actually, it's hovered just below 40% for much of the last 4 decades. And that level of college attainment really hasn't hampered us until fairly recently. In fact, a decade or so ago, the U.S. led the world in educational attainment. No longer. College attainment rates are soaring among young adults in many other nations, while our rate remains essentially flat. Figures released over a year ago put us in the race for educational attainment at 8th. Now, according to the latest figures, we've already slipped to 15th in the proportion of 25 to 34-year-olds who earn a 2- or 4-year degree. Clearly, in an age where economies and labor markets are increasingly global, this downward trend is more than just troubling. It's a serious and it's an urgent problem, perhaps the most serious problem that we face as a nation. Today, and certainly in the years to come, workers without college-level learning simply won't have the knowledge and skills that they need to succeed. In fact, the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce has estimated that by 2018, 63% of all of the nation's jobs will require some form of post-secondary education or training. Think about that. That's a huge increase since the mid-1970s, when less than a third of all jobs required education beyond high school. The ramifications of this, I think, are clear and they're sobering. If we fail to address this massive shift, if we fail to adequately prepare our citizens to compete in the modern global economy, those citizens and our nation will fall behind. Now, according to 2010 census figures, just 38.3% of working-age Americans, those between the ages of 25 and 64, hold at least an associate degree. The attainment rate has increased just a tiny bit over the last couple of years, up from 37.9% in 2008 and 38.1% in 2009. But obviously, that progress has been painfully slow, well below the level that will get us to that 60% rate by 2025. In fact, at our current rates of production, the national attainment rate will reach only about 47% by 2025. That gap of 13 percentage points represents more than 23 million people, 23 million degree holders who our economy and our society desperately need, but simply won't have unless we find ways to increase college access and college success. So let's put this issue into a little bit more of a local context. Here in Cleveland, college attainment rates are right in line with the national average. About 38.6% of working-age residents here have at least a 2-year degree. Not exactly encouraging. And yet, the statewide college attainment rate actually paints an even darker picture, because Ohio is essentially running 3 percentage points behind the national trend. In 2010, the state's degree attainment rate was less than 36%, and it's on this trajectory to get to only about 44% by 2025. That rate translates into a shortfall of more than 900,000 degree-holding citizens, almost 1 million Ohioans who will lack the education and training that they'll need to be competitive in the labor market. And make no mistake, Ohio's labor market is increasingly demanding. Labor experts predict that by 2018, 2/3 of those jobs will require some form of post-secondary education. In the next 6 years, Ohio will need to fill 1.7 million vacancies resulting from job creation, from worker retirements, and from other factors. Of these expected vacancies, well over half will require post-secondary credentials. Now, at this point in my speech, I know what some of you are thinking. Some of you are probably thinking, what is this guy talking about? Hasn't he been reading the newspaper? Doesn't he know that jobs for recent graduates are in short supply and that opportunities are more limited than they've been for many years? Well, let's talk about that. Here are some things we know. First, we know that the unemployment rate for those with college degrees are considerably lower than for those who lack post-secondary credentials, and this is true even for recent college graduates. According to data from late 2011, right at the end of the year, national unemployment rates for 18 to 24-year-olds who weren't in school were about 8.9% for those with bachelor's degrees, 11.9% for those with associate degrees. But for those who have only a high school credential, that jobless rate is a whopping 22.9%. Now, we also know that the wage differentials for people with college degrees compared to those with high school credentials are wide. I guess that's a fact that we've understood for many years, right? If you go to college, you make more money. What's less recognized is that that wage differential is actually growing. Individuals with a bachelor's degree make an average of more than 84% over their lifetimes compared with those with just a high school diploma. Now, what's interesting about this is that this is an increase even since the late 1990s, when the wage premium was about 75%. What that should tell us is that this increasing gap shows that the labor market is actually hungry for college graduates. Even in this job market, employers are willing to pay more for college graduates. Median salaries for 2012 graduates are up a healthy 4.5%, according to the National Association of Colleges and Employers, well above inflation and other cost of living indicators. Starting salaries in some of the fastest growing fields like business and computer science and engineering and health sciences range from the mid-40s to the high 50s. Well, let's look at this picture in another way. According to data from that Georgetown University Center, we can see just how important post-secondary education can be to job seekers. On average, in industries that are growing the fastest, industries like healthcare and various service industries, about 7 in 10 workers already have a post-secondary credential. On the other side of the ledger, which is those industries that are declining in terms of their relative share of jobs, only 4 in 10 workers have attended college. So I think the message is clear. In the coming years, fewer and fewer jobs will be available to those who lack post-secondary education, with the best-paying jobs going to those people with college degrees, especially in high-demand fields. Now, does this mean that every person who graduates from a college or university is going to get a good job and lead a middle-class life? No. The point is, in this environment, a college credential is a prerequisite. There's no guarantee that a student who obtains a college degree is going to get a good job and have a middle-class life. But let me assure you, in the future, you almost certainly will be poor if you don't have a post-secondary credential. Now, even this doesn't tell the whole story. The seismic shift that's underway is not just a shift from low-skill occupations to high-skill occupations. It's that almost every job that we can think of is becoming a higher-skill job. Even in those so-called declining industries, the need for post-secondary educated workers is becoming acute as jobs become more complex. So jobs in manufacturing, in mining, really in nearly any practical field that you can name, from auto repair to X-ray technology, now require some level of post-secondary education. What's more, all jobs increasingly demand the so-called soft skills that higher-level learning provides, those critical thinking and analytical and problem-solving skills that make workers more adaptable in a constantly changing environment. And here's one more compelling truth about the benefits of boosting college education. It's not just a way to prevent job loss. It's actually a proven means to stimulate job creation. Economists tell us that much of the nation's economic growth over the last half-century is largely attributable to just two things: technology and increased educational attainment. Now, why are these two things so important? It's because they increase productivity, and productivity growth is the engine that drives all advanced economies. When employers have a more highly educated workforce, they've actually been shown to organize the work in more efficient and productive ways. They've learned through experience that hiring better educated workers increases productivity and enhances workplace creativity. This, in turn, helps fuel the innovation that leads to new products and services, new markets, and new jobs to serve those markets. So the key to the nation's long-term economic success is a 21st century labor force, one with adaptable workers who possess high-level skills and relevant knowledge. And those skills, that kind of knowledge, can only be offered in well-designed and rigorous post-secondary education programs. That's why Goal 2025 is all about ensuring that many more students enroll in and complete those programs. It's about learning. Of course, we know that the benefits of higher education aren't limited to individuals, and they extend well beyond economies and labor markets. The broader societal benefits of a well-educated population are enormous and well recognized: lower crime rates, less reliance on public assistance, better health, increased levels of civic involvement, things like voting. And as Americans, we all recognize that equity of educational opportunity is a shared value. Every person, regardless of their finances or their family circumstances, deserves the chance to succeed and contribute to our collective well-being. Like nothing else, higher education offers that opportunity. For all of these reasons, then, Lumina is committed to that big goal. As I said earlier, everything that we do as an organization is designed to achieve Goal 2025. The grants that we provide to support research and effective practice in higher education, our communications and our convening efforts, and increasingly our work on public policy, all of this has that singular focus, which is to boost the proportion of Americans with those high-quality degrees and credentials to 60%. We understand that this is a very ambitious goal. In fact, we know that it can't be reached without the cooperative and concerted effort of stakeholders from every arena, from K-12 and higher education to government, labor, business leaders, and economic development officials. In fact, one of the specific lessons I think that we've learned at Lumina is that we have to take that employer community much more into account as an increasingly important partner in driving college attainment. My appearance today here, I think, is very much a part of that ongoing effort to reach out to a broad community that includes employers. Now, over the years, in part because we have our roots in that post-secondary education arena, Lumina has enjoyed good relationships with what we'll call the supply side of higher education. That is, with the institutions and systems, and with the policymakers who shape the environment in which those schools and systems operate. Clearly, we value those relationships, and we're working very hard to strengthen them. But we've become increasingly interested in involving individuals and organizations who are on the demand side. This includes students, to be sure, but also employers and workforce development officials and other members of the business community. It's clear that, as a nation, we need to tighten the connections between college success and economic success. And that connection needs to be tightened from both sides. In other words, for us to have any hope of getting to that 60% attainment goal, both sides will need to change. Now, on one side, higher education institutions and government officials need to do a better job of listening and responding to the needs of employers. They have to show a greater willingness to work in genuine partnership with the business and workforce development community, to give students what they truly need to succeed in the job and in life. And they must eradicate this false distinction between what many tend to revere as education and what's often derided as mere training. It's well past time for a full realization that virtually all skills are workforce relevant and that they're all constantly evolving. The work that we're doing at Lumina, and really all that I've learned in more than 2 decades of work in this arena, convinces me that fundamental changes are needed on the supply side. Simply put, it's time for a thoughtful redesign of the post-secondary system. Despite its many strengths that admittedly serve this nation very well for decades, the current system just can't get us where we need to be in the 21st century. Perhaps the best indicator of the limits of the current system is the very real problems we are now confronting with college costs. Now, after my remarks today, I'm hoping to have a few minutes to spend some time talking informally with some of the participants in the City Club student program, all juniors and seniors from high school programs. I'm absolutely sure that many of these promising young people who are in that program, perhaps all of them, are deeply worried about how they can afford that all-important next step in their lives. They know, and anyone listening to me today surely knows, that the increasing cost of higher education has challenged students and families for many years. But now, that challenge is truly immense. In fact, I think it's clear that we've reached a critical crossroads when it comes to funding higher education in our country. Simply put, what we've done in the past simply isn't going to work anymore. For decades, the American higher education system has essentially relied on 2 major sources of funds: government appropriations and the tuition and fees that are paid by students and families. When one was in short supply, we usually looked to the other to fill in the gap. Both of these sources have increased over the last 2 decades to meet the rising demand and to pay for the higher costs of education. It's been a constant chorus, sort of droning in the background, what I like to call the mood music accompanying the national conversation about college finance. But now, that music has stopped. After years of college costs rising faster than inflation, faster than family incomes, faster even than the cost of health care, we're at or near the limit. Neither government nor students can afford these continuing cost increases. The money, and to be blunt, the political will, are just not there. Yet the demand and the societal need for increased college attainment is greater than ever before in our nation's history. That's what this Goal 2025 is all about. It's about meeting that rising need. Now, make no mistake, the challenge is huge. We need to scale up a system so that it can produce the numbers of graduates that our economy needs while maintaining or hopefully improving the quality of its graduates, and frankly, without the prospect of major new investment made by the federal government or states or students and their parents. In short, what we need to aim for is a more productive system of higher education, one that enables institutions to provide the support needed to help every student succeed. We need a system that ensures quality by fostering genuine learning, not just completion of a program, a system that truly prepares students for work and for life in an increasingly global society. Now, such a system should allow students to accumulate credits from different institutions over the course of several years to earn a degree, minimizing waste and duplicative effort. That system should also acknowledge and credit prior learning, skills developed through work or through military service, and which often reflect a student's ability as well or even better than earning classroom credit. At Lumina, we believe strongly that higher education needs to be far more focused on the needs of students. And it's critically important that we focus on today's students, the ever-growing numbers of low-income, first-generation, minority, and adult students, the 21st century students who constitute the real world on campuses these days. Ultimately, this means that the higher education institutions need to be more student-centered, or maybe to put it in terms that better resonate with employers and business leaders, it has to be more customer-focused. By better serving its main customers, students, the post-secondary system will also meet the needs of employers, not to mention the ultimate customer base, which is obviously the American society itself. Again, the business community, the demand side, also has a major role in making that big goal a reality. And as I said, my Lumina colleagues and I are doing more and more these days to encourage employers to seize that role. Put most simply and directly, we're urging business leaders to get in the game. What's needed now is for employers and business advocates to get off the sidelines, to actively and eagerly participate in a broad-based effort to increase college attainment. The numbers don't lie. Achievement of Goal 2025 will demand steady increases in the number of Americans earning degrees and certificates each year for more than a dozen years. Clearly, for that to happen, the higher education system will have to operate with much greater efficiency than ever before. New processes and procedures will be required. Innovative approaches will have to be taken, all in an effort to increase productivity and to maximize higher education's return on the investment. Obviously, these are lessons that any successful business person has learned and has been applied over many years, and I think these are lessons that we can learn in the higher education arena. Now, it's true that colleges and universities generate people, not products, so the lessons don't translate precisely and they'll have to be adapted. But I think if we take an approach that's mutually respectful and truly collaborative, there's no doubt that much progress can be made if business takes a teaching role in these productivity efforts. It's also important that higher education focus much more of its efforts specifically on increasing attainment among adult students. The idea in targeting adults for post-secondary success is not simply that we need to ensure that employers have a ready supply of trained workers for their own businesses. What's really required is a view that what we're doing is much broader, that what we're ultimately about is empowering the individual, because that's the power that ultimately drives all businesses. Finally, I think employers can't limit their working partnerships to those that include members of the higher education community. They have to reach out to that vital third partner in the equation, which is the policy community. In short, employers must become active and committed advocates for policy change, the kinds of systemic, civic-minded policy change whose aim is to improve the overall economy and society as a whole. Now, in practical terms, what we're talking about is asking business representatives to view their role in Goal 2025 through the lens of three perspectives, what we call company, community, and country. From the company perspective, each employer can take direct and meaningful steps to aid college attainment among their own workers. For example, more and better programs that provide tuition reimbursement, assistance and counseling to help create individualized learning plans for workers, programs that offer tangible rewards to employees who earn degrees and credentials, etc. Next, from the community perspective, employers should make education a central plank in their platform of community engagement and community service. In fact, boosting higher education attainment should really be at the top of the list when it comes to corporate responsibility efforts. What better way to demonstrate good corporate citizenship than to foster an education-friendly workplace? Such a move would not only open a wealth of partnership opportunities with other local organizations, it can also produce huge long-term benefits for any community. After all, a well-educated population doesn't merely just improve and deepen the local labor pool, it boosts the overall quality of life in that entire community. Finally, and most broadly, employers need to view this effort through the larger lens of country. In other words, business leaders, and really all of us as Americans, need to be advocates for increased college attainment because that's what the country needs. Reaching that big goal will benefit all of us. A better workforce leads to more robust job creation, to sustained growth, and to greater economic security in this global age. A better educated citizenry also means increased civic involvement and greater social stability. So in other words, and in closing, Goal 2025 isn't something for Lumina to achieve. It's not an initiative owned by the field of philanthropy, or by employers, or by state and federal policymakers, or by higher education institutions. It is and must be a broad-based, all-inclusive national effort. Increasing post-secondary education is in everyone's interests, and that makes it everyone's business. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to be here.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we're listening to a forum featuring Jamie Merisotis, President and CEO of the Lumina Foundation. We will return to Mr. Merisotis in a moment for a traditional City Club question and answer period. Please go ahead and formulate your questions now. Remember to keep them brief. Now we'd like to return to our speaker for the traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from all of you here. Holding the microphone today is Program Director Carrie Miller. First question, please.
Thank you very much for being here today. Not long ago, Harvard and MIT announced a commitment of $60 million to a program of making their educators available to the world on the Internet. Would you comment on that in terms of the focus that you're bringing to us?
So what you're referring to is an initiative, MITx, and various other efforts that we're seeing some of the best institutions in the country, like Stanford, also involving similar efforts to use technology and deliver learning online using the curriculum and the resources of some of our best institutions. I think this has huge potential to drive towards that student-centered system I was talking about, to democratize the process and to create greater opportunities for a larger number of people. Now, I'm the first to say that education is not an intellectual filling station where you pull up to the pump, download knowledge, and drive away. I get that there's more to learning than simply that. But technology has gotten us to a point where we can deliver certain kinds of learning using technology in specific ways. We can't deliver learning through technology across the array of the curriculum that we have in higher education. But there are ways in which we can use technology to deliver learning much more effectively than we have in the past. And let me take it a step further. I think we can deliver, even within the traditional classroom structure, using what's called blended learning methods, much more effectively to increase that productivity that I was talking about. So an example is Carnegie Mellon University has developed something called the Open Learning Initiative. At Carnegie Mellon, which I think we would argue is one of the best institutions in America, they're delivering their general education classes, those sort of prerequisite courses that you need to take, using highly advanced technological means that use advanced tutoring and support technology to actually deliver learning to the students using technological means. The kicker on the Carnegie Mellon Open Learning Initiative is that students complete the courses in half the time and have the same or better learning outcomes than the students taking the same exact classes in the classroom. That has the potential to deliver learning in a different way, in a more blended means, so that we can have the kinds of things like MITx, but we can also have these efforts that blend them in the traditional campuses in order to be able to serve more students better and to help improve the overall system productivity.
You spoke about the importance of a college education. Certainly you cited many statistics about the economic value of it and all the things that will help make life more successful. However, there are many thousands, maybe millions of high school students whose interests and whose abilities do not really qualify them for a traditional college education. And what effort does your foundation make to help those people who really belong in some type of a school that may be a year or two, that'll teach them a trade, something which they can find a job, but not necessarily a college education?
So this is a very good question, and I want to reinforce the point that I made at the beginning, which is that when we say college, we mean anything post-high school. So college doesn't mean a bachelor's degree or even necessarily an associate degree. It means high-quality learning that takes you beyond the high school level. That's what the vast majority of the jobs being created are focusing on. And at Lumina Foundation, we've been heavily focused on the sub-baccalaureate education and training that's taking place. So earlier in our history, we were sort of one of the first national foundations that saw success in community colleges as a critical element to meeting our nation's needs. We're proud to have supported institutions here in Ohio through something called Achieving the Dream. And we have many other opportunities to support learning at the sub-baccalaureate level. What we also need to start thinking about, though, is what about those people who are in those certificate programs that are more occupationally oriented? How can we ensure that those people have the same high-quality opportunities that students would have as they advance along the learning ladder? A report next week that will be released by the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Economy gets at these issues of certificates and what high-value, high-quality certificates are all about. We think that is a very important part of the equation. What's most important in the system, in my view, is the learning that's represented in the degrees. A college degree or a credential, whatever it is, should actually mean something. What you know and are able to do with that should be clearly articulated through a statement of competencies that you can point to and demonstrate. And I want to point out a little bit of self-interest here, that Lumina Foundation has actually developed a tool for this called the Degree Qualifications Profile that actually defines those competencies, the skills and knowledge and civic learning capacities and other things that you should have at the associate, the bachelor's, and master's degree level, irrespective of field of study. We're testing this tool at over 100 institutions around the country, but the idea here is to get to a different point as a country so that you as an individual know that if you have a bachelor's degree, this is what it means. And by the way, the employer that you're going to work for also knows that this is what it means. Right now, what they know is the reputation of the institution and the fact that you earned 120 credits. That's what they know about your bachelor's degree. We need a system that is much different and that can articulate those qualifications that you have at the certificate, at the associate, at the bachelor's degree level, and beyond.
In the last few years, there's been a lot of information coming out about some for-profit educational institutions that are very good at getting government loans for their students and not so good at giving them a high-quality education that they really lets them be able to pay off those loans. The result is that we're getting a lot of people with a lot of debt and not the ability to pay off that debt, and also that they're sapping a lot of money that we set aside to help people get good high-quality educations. Is that a problem? And if it is, what should be done about it?
So I joke with people that I've started my career in the 1980s writing about two things, for-profit education and student debt. The world has finally caught up to me. So I'm thrilled that we're finally now talking about things that I was writing about 30 years ago. What's different compared to 30 years ago is that the environment has changed. We'll leave the student debt conversation to another point. But on the for-profits, what we have is a more complicated situation. We have high-quality learning happening in some for-profit institutions. And we continue to have the problems of under-attainment and the fact that there is significant reliance on federal aid that I was writing about in 1986 and 87. So the question is, how do we sort the wheat from the chaff? How do we ensure that that for-profit education, which I want to be clear, is going to continue? We are going to continue to see the advancement of for-profit education because of that system demand I was talking about. We need a lot more people with these high-quality college degrees and credentials. They're successful because they're getting people into these schools, and some of them are doing a good job at helping people succeed. What we've got to figure out here is how to create a different environment so that we can ensure that those institutions, and really all post-secondary institutions, meet these standards of learning that are important to be successful in work and in life. I think that the spotlight that's been shown on these for-profits in the last couple of years has been really helpful in galvanizing some conversation around making sure that quality is a critical element in terms of our higher education system. But I want to be candid. We should be talking about those quality issues in the entire system of higher education. That's a critical element of the overall dialogue that I think is uncomfortable for some of us who've been advocates so long for higher education. But the truth is, this is a broad conversation, and those things like understanding what degrees and credentials represent should apply to every institution.
I work for a human resources consulting firm, and one of our portfolios of services has to do with executive search. And so as we talk to a number of our clients, they lament the fact that they cannot find people skilled in IT, or they can't find engineers. And yet when I talk to young people, females, minorities, low-income students, and I inquire about their curriculum, virtually never does engineering or IT come up as a curriculum choice. And when I ask about it, their explanations indicate a complete lack of understanding of the wide scope of employment opportunities that are available in these two areas. As a matter of fact, these students tend to gravitate toward the limited number of employment opportunities, careers that they see in their small worlds. So has Lumina given any consideration to how it goes about expanding the scopes of particularly low-income students so that they are now pursuing curriculums that are better matched to the workforce needs?
Yeah, so this is a terrific question, and let me start at the beginning, which is the root of the problem that you're getting at is really in our schools, right? Because what we have is this progression of problems where fewer and fewer people are interested in these things the further they get in the progression of the educational scale. So we need to start with empowering people to understand that these opportunities exist at a very young age. I'll tell you a quick personal anecdote. So I have a 9-year-old. My 9-year-old took this after-school course this year, which was essentially a pre-engineering class. Now, he doesn't know that's what it was. He thought it was about building cool stuff. But it was really about helping him understand about fundamental principles of engineering. Creating that sort of enthusiasm and excitement for careers in technology, in engineering. We need, the people who have the fundamentals in the math skills and science and those kinds of things. You have to start very early. So that's one fundamental problem that I think we've got to address. The second that I think we've got to focus on is that we have a serious problem with, I guess I'll call it with family motivation, which is what happens in too many families is the parents essentially say, listen, honey, that's hard. You sure you want to do that? Right? That science stuff, that's really difficult. Because it was hard for them. Because the way we taught science and math and those kinds of things in the past, they weren't very good in this country. They've actually gotten better. So in a way, we have some responsibility as parents to help encourage individuals, our children, to be able to think about those kind of careers. I think at a policy level, and this gets to your question about Lumina's work, I think at a policy level, we need to put our thumb on the scale more in terms of creating incentives for businesses to invest in STEM education and for government to provide direct support to ensure that those kind of programs happen, even for people who are adults, who are in the sort of retraining mode, et cetera. Because if you look at, one of the most innovative models that we've seen around the country, this Western Governors University, which provides online competency-based learning, one of their 4 areas that they're doing work in is IT. And the reason is that there are a lot of opportunities for people to get good jobs in the IT field. And Western Governors University is providing opportunities for those individuals in that field. And we've supported Western Governors University in a variety of other efforts. But the point is that we've got to create more incentives for individuals, and we've got to create more incentives for the businesses and use some policy incentives in order to create increasing chances that people will be excited about those careers. Because you're right, so much of the job growth is really in that area.
Hello. I own my own company around college preparation and readiness, but I'm also a member of the Higher Education Compact Best Practice Task Force. And as you know, we have your colleague coming to the symposium on Monday, June 11th, James Applegate, to really talk about the national landscape around college readiness. I wanted to hear from you on some of the things that the Lumina Foundation is doing to really address or see what type of best practices are you seeing in similar communities to Cleveland when it comes to really helping students persist through college once they're actually on their college campus.
Well, let me take on two issues, if I might, in terms of your question. The first is that readiness question that you raised, and I don't want to steal any of Jim's thunder because he's a better speaker than I am. So trust me, you will appreciate that. The critical piece in the college readiness, because it relates to the second part of the equation, is that we have to think about getting students ready for college, not just academically, but also financially and socially. I think one of the challenges we face is a lack of understanding that in the real lives of these students, these academic and financial and social challenges are often co-equals. You've got family responsibilities. You've got real concerns with money and resources. And those are all being balanced out with these academic concerns. To be sure, we have significant challenges in terms of academic capacity of our young people. We know this from the international comparisons. We know this from the questions that we get from colleges and universities saying we're not getting people prepared to do college-level work. So that's very important. But I think if we fail to take into account the academic and the financial and the social as co-equals, we'll run the risk of having a system that continues to support the haves and leaves the have-nots behind. The best indicator that we have of this problem is the data that you hear all the time, which is that the most academically qualified low-income students in America today go to college at the same rate, so these are the top-performing low-income students, at the same rate as the lowest-performing high-income students. So that's all you need to know, that this is more than just about academics, that there are other factors that are associated with this that you've got to take into account. So we then translate that into the college level, and through our efforts, we're really focused on trying to find ways to get to system-level change so that we can actually help communities like Cleveland actually create more opportunities for students to succeed. And there's a variety of ways to do that. There's no magic bullets here, as you know. Targeting that group of adults who've gone to college but have no college degree, have no credential, the 1 in 5 Americans who fit that, that's one way of doing it. Finding ways to do more of that prior learning assessment, that's a critical way of doing it. Supporting new ways to advance financial aid so that we deliver financial aid more effectively. I'll give you a quick example of that. So we've supported efforts. There's been some work on this done in Ohio, but in other parts of the country, there's even more of this has gone on, which is experimentation with delivery of financial aid. For a lot of low-income students, a single event can take them off the track of staying in college. Literally, their car breaks down, somebody gets sick in the family. It's amazing. Well, one of the things that we've been looking at is efforts to deliver financial aid within the semester based on meeting certain requirements, academic progress, and other things, as opposed to just getting your aid at the beginning of each semester. Why? Because it's more like a paycheck. It's more like an infusion of capital at a critical moment so that you can say, oh, yeah, my car broke down, guess what? I've got the $180 to fix it so I can keep going, as opposed to getting the money up front. Now, there are challenges for the institutions, I want to acknowledge that, in terms of delivering the aid within the semester. But that's an example of the kinds of things that we're trying to support because we think they have potential to reimagine how we provide those kind of services to students.
Hello, I'm Lana Moreski, and I'm on the Ohio Board of Regents. I really applaud your efforts to get industry involved more with education, more directly with education. But even so, we have a real serious problem here in Ohio. A couple Sundays ago on Mother's Day, the front page of the New York Times, above the fold, talked solely about Ohio and how we were 6th from the bottom in terms of the amount of money the state provided each student. Yeah. and it went on for 2 other whole pages inside. So that was quite embarrassing for us from Ohio. I would like to know what solutions you might have to that problem to help us get out of this ditch.
Yeah, the biggest challenge, Lana, is quite simply that the resources that we have. You know, I made the point here that we have a political will challenge, and I believe that. I believe we have a problem. I believe increasing investment in higher education is a great thing to do for our country. But by and large, we have lost these policy debates consistently, not just in Ohio, but in most states around the country. And the reason, I think, is that we need to be more introspective about this. Why does it take more than 5 years for a college student to get a bachelor's degree? Why is it so complicated for students to work their way through a system that has such a confusing array of choices that they literally get lost in the system and they can't find their way through? What are the ways in which we can improve productivity? I mean, that's what really this is all about. When I use the word productivity, the hair goes up on the back of the necks of about half the people in the room because they think about what we tried to do in the 1990s, which was make faculty teach more classes, and we said, okay, faculty teach more, then everything's going to be fine. It was a disaster. It was a big mistake. What we need to do more of is figure out how we increase the capacity of the system to serve people better. And that means saying, look, it should take 4 years to get a 4-year degree. What are we doing to align student services, to deliver the curriculum so that it's better block scheduled? What are we doing to help students actually complete their degrees and get out into the workforce in record time? We've experimented with accelerated programs around the country. I know that you've got this mandate for 3-year degrees here. The time factor to me is not the issue. The issue is, what are students learning? What does that credential represent? And if we can figure out what that credential represents, I guarantee you it's not going to take us 5 years in order to be able to do that. So rather than setting a time-based standard, we should be setting a learning-based standard and then driving all of our resources towards getting students that learning that they need. I'll bet you all of our resources that, in fact, the time to degree would come down and we'd be better served. The real challenge for us is that the business model of higher education, which, as I said in my remarks, served us well as a country for many years, simply isn't going to serve us in the future going forward. If we've got this gap of 23 million people that we need to get to nationally to have more degrees, if it represents, from less than 40% to 60% in a 12-year period, we can't just supersize this system. It's not going to work. We've got to deliver the system in a better way. That's hard. I'm sympathetic. I'm empathetic. I've been a part of the system. But what we've got to commit to is to the change to make that happen. And we can't simply say, you know what, all we need is more resources, and then we'll be able to deliver. We had that chance. We did not deliver. We've now got to demonstrate why increasing investment matters, because we need increasing investment. That's what productivity is all about.
This is something of a follow-up to your comments about cost and readiness. It's irritating beyond belief to have a kid go to college and then find out that the first half of the courses they're taking are remedial courses, which are extraordinarily costly, particularly at a 4-year college. What efforts can you tell us that are being made to coordinate between the colleges and the high schools, or the school systems, period, so that students, as they are looking to go to college, have a clear understanding as to whether they're going to get by the basic freshman English or are they going to end up in remedial, in which case they'd probably be much better off starting their college experience in a much less expensive 2-year community college.
Yeah, so I've been a part of this remedial education debate for about 2 decades. And so let me tell you my candid perspective on this, which is that we've systematically disempowered the institutions to actually do anything useful here in this process. And the reason is that we've essentially said, look, remedial education is something nobody wants to do. So policymakers don't want to pay for it, students don't want to take it, and the best faculty don't want to teach it. So it's a failure. It's a failure of the system. And that failure, to your point, is rooted in the fact that we have challenges at the K-12 level that then come to us at the higher education level. But I also want to be clear that a lot of the remedial education needs that we have in this country are adults. A lot of the remedial learning that we're doing is for adults people who maybe never got it, or it's been so long that they don't have those opportunities. So it is a much more complicated equation than simply saying, start in a community college, everything will be okay. That's been our point now for about 2 decades, and we've seen very little success from that model. So what do we need to do? First, and this gets to your point, we need to do a much better job of aligning what is good news in terms of the curricular reforms at the K-12 level with what we're seeing in higher education. So the Common Core, which many of you are familiar with, which currently exists in English language arts and math, that the majority of states are focused on, this creates an opportunity for higher levels, higher learning outcomes for students coming out of high school that should be matched with what the requirements are of the colleges and universities. This is an opportunity, and we're talking at a policy level at Lumina Foundation about better aligning people around that. The second thing that I think is very important is that we need to rethink how we deliver remedial education, because the part that you didn't mention that is very important is that a significant number of the people who are in those remedial programs fail. They never get out of that remedial track, and they have nothing to show for their collegiate experience. And that means redesigning the delivery of the remedial education. The Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching is doing groundbreaking work on rethinking math education, which is where we have the highest rates of failure, so that we can actually help students be more successful, get them onto the collegiate track, and help them actually succeed in college. But this is a big challenge for us, and we can't duck it. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we've been listening to the annual James S. Lipscomb Memorial Forum. And we're very pleased to have Barbara and Bill Lipscomb here with us here today. And we've been listening to Jamie Merisotis, President and CEO of the Lumina Foundation. Thank you, Mr. Merisotis. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.